Students, I hope that you enjoyed this virtual field trip and that you learned more about the Battle of Culloden by walking through the actual battlefield than by just learning about it from your textbooks. Now let's go back to those standards and learning outcomes and review everything that you learned. The first standard asks you to explain how the world's nations are governed differently. After spending a fair amount of time looking at how the US government operates, I hope you realize some differences between it and the way Britain is governed. As you learned in this virtual field trip, Britain functions under a monarchical system, where one single sovereign is head of the state, and where power is transferred based on bloodline. Do you think that if Britain had a system of government other than a monarchy, the Battle of Culloden would have still occurred? The second standard asks you to explain how weather and climate influence the natural character of place, and I think we can all agree that Culloden War was greatly influenced by these geographical phenomena. You learn how several outcomes of the battle were affected by the weather, climate, and geography of the Scottish Highlands, to the detriment of the Jacobite army. But do you think the result of the battle would have been completely different if it had been fought on another location? Perhaps one that was warmer and with more stable grounds? The third standard asks you to describe the rise and achievements of significant rulers in Europe. In this virtual field trip, you learned about the Duke of Cumberland, how he was called to take charge of the militia against the Jacobites, and how he accomplished the greatest achievement of his life, to defeat the Jacobites at the Battle of Culloden. Most importantly, you learned about the many reasons that basically guaranteed his victory. If the Duke hadn't had these unforeseen advantages, do you think he would have fared the same way? The fourth standard asks you to use a timeline to establish cause and effect relationships of historical events. The virtual field trip is set like a timeline, with the modules ordered in the correct sequence of events that led to the Battle of Culloden and what occurred afterwards. As such, you learned about the main issues related to the British throne that sparked the Jacobite risings and ultimately caused the Battle of Culloden, as well as what occurred after Cumberland defeated the Jacobites. What do you think would have happened if the Jacobites had won the battle instead of the government? Finally, the fifth standard asks you to interpret and evaluate primary and secondary sources, which is a skill you have been practicing for a while now. As you might have realized, the virtual field trip was created using both primary and secondary sources, with the artifacts located at the site being the original pieces of information created during the time under study. By going through each module, you have been able to compare and contrast the kind of information conveyed by these different sources. Did you notice the somewhat biased comments of the tour guide? What does this tell us about Scottish identity, and how can this affect history? Does it mean that secondary sources shouldn't be trusted? As you can see, dear students, you have learned a lot in this your first international adventure. I can't wait to hear your thoughts about the Battle of Culloden when we meet tomorrow in class.